Swallowed by the veil and forgotten. He welcomed the weight. It dulled the tremor still running through his hands after the global announcement and the flood of whispers he refused to read. The Shadow Forger class mark, an ink black sigil like a crescent split by an anvil, now pulsed faintly on the back of his right hand. When he flexed his fingers, the mark answered with a cool, needling tingle along his meridians. Passive skill unlocked, Umbral Chi Manipulation, Rank 1, you may condense ambient shadow chi into tools and effects. Costs stamina instead of mana at low ranks. Perks, Vale Step, Short Range Blur Dash in Dim Light, Umbral Hearth, create a field forge at shadow-rich nodes, Sightless Edge, plus 5% damage when unseen. He rolled his shoulders and tested Vale Step. The world snapped sideways in a smear of gray and he reappeared 3 paces to the left, cool air knifing across his face. Efficient. Short. Exactly what he needed to dictate the terms of every fight. The shadow anvil's glow had faded to a memory, but its presence lingered like iron on the tongue. A new prompt hovered in his peripheral vision. Legacy quest chain, Shadow Forge, Part 2 Tempering requirements, Gather, 1, Umbral Iron Vein Core, 3, Vials Moonspore Resin, 1, Tier 1 Beast Core. Forge a weapon at an Umbral Hearth to prove your hand can shape the dark. A clean list. No luck rolls disguised as destiny, just work. Kale marked 3 waypoints on his map, each tucked deep within the Twilight Vale's jagged arteries, each a place most players would only enter in groups. He moved. The first waypoint lay at Hollow Spine Ravine, where the Vale's trees gave up trying to live straight and instead twisted into a ribcage over a seam of black rock. The path down was a narrow shelf slick with dew. In the distance, he heard iron rasp iron, the sound of metal scraping against breath. He ducked behind a jut of stone and peered into the ravine floor. Shadow wasps thick as a clenched fist swarmed around a vein that pulsed with dull, heart-like beats. Umbral iron. The stuff had once been a guild bottleneck, high value, high attrition. The wasps were fragile, but their stings stacked hemorrhage, shredding early game armor like paper. He dragged a fingertip across the damp rock, let the mist bead there, then whispered, Hearth. Umbral Hearth conjured, 120s. Heat source, shadow friction, unstable. Output, low. Integration bonus, plus 5% success chance while in deep shade. A tiny forge no larger than a camp stove coalesced from dripping shadow. Its flame was not flame at all, more a hole torn in light, a sustained absence. Kale fetted a pinch of nightshade ash from his last fight and a sliver of his stamina bar. The shadow-forged dagger on his belt thrummed in reply like a pleased cat. He did not mine with a pickaxe. He shaped, palm out, fingers braced like a smith catching a falling billet. Umbral chi manipulation flowed, nudged, coaxed the vein's core into bloom. Where greedier hands would hack 100 scraps and anger the swarm, Kale teased a single dark crystal the size of a thumbnail free. The wasps noticed anyway. A black cloud lifted and drifted toward him like rain made mean. Come on then, he said softly. He used Vale Step to the forge, dagger out, every swipe snapping a thread of shadow. The wasps popped like ink blots, each kill feeding a spark into the dagger's hilt. Shadow Forged Dagger, Growth, Empowerment, +6 rightward arrow +8 trait unlocked at +8, Edge Memory, retain bonus versus last enemy type slain for 5 minutes. When the last wasp fell, he set the crystal on the hearth. Heat, cold heat, licked his knuckles. The Umbral Iron Vein Core clicked into his inventory with a satisfying weight. 1 down. The second waypoint shimmered faintly even before he reached it, Moonspore Grove. Ghost blue fungi clung to the roots of trees like lanterns left by careful hands, each cap pulsing on a slow beat. Moth wraiths flittered in the glow, not truly alive, not truly dead. Their wings shredded light itself, standing too close to a cluster made the world look carved into white noise. Kale pulled a cloth mask over his face out of a habit he had taught himself last life. The grove was not poison in the classic MMO sense. It was worse. It blurred your movement inputs with micro lag. Players blamed their connections and died angry. He skirted the brightest clusters and targeted an older stump riddled with small, steady spores. One vial took a minute to coax, heat the resin without boiling it, spin the vial until the threads braided visible as hair. Moonspore resin, 1/3, acquired. Moonspore resin, 2/3, acquired. On the third, the grove protested. The moth wraiths converged, thin bodies drawing long shadow strings behind them like kites. He anchored a tripwire of umbral thread from knee to knee between two roots and deliberately stepped backward into the light. They followed, their wings warped and bent, seeking the brightest path, and hit the line. The foremost wraith collapsed into a coil of ribboning dark. New technique learned, shade wire, basic tool. Set a brittle filament of condensed umbra. Breaks on first contact. Triggers small stagger and light affinity on strike. Kale bottled the last resin and retreated before the grove found a more decisive opinion on thieves. His stamina bar hovered at half. He knelt, tore a strip of spirit beast hide, and wrapped it around his offhand, a cheap brace against the ache he knew the final stop would bring. The third waypoint, the one players avoided not for numbers but for stories, was Nightfall Den. A matriarch's lair. He sensed the boundary before the minimap marked it. Sound dampened. The mist settled heavy as a blanket. Even the leaves stopped pretending to move. He checked his gear, starter leathers, growth dagger at +8, 3 vials of resin, 1 core, ego under control. Good enough. The den did not advertise itself as a cave. It began as a snag of root and dropped into black. He squeezed through and slid on his side down a short, gritty slope into a hollow tangled with claw marks. Bones crunched underfoot, pixelated and all too real in sound. The matriarch watched him from the back wall, eyes steady coals. Twice the size of the beast he had fought earlier, her ribs rose and fell slowly, as if the whole den breathed with her. Kale did not rush. He let her come. She circled once, tested his reactions with feints, then lunged in a line so straight it felt like a question. He answered with Vale step, not to the side but through a fold in her shadow, popping up at her flank and cutting low. Bleed applied. Sightless edge bonus active, +5%. She roared. Sound knifed around the roots. He backed up, let her overcommit on a pounce, set shade wire mid-air, cut it with a flick so it snapped against her neck like an insult. Minor stagger, enough. He leapt, dagger jabbing twice into the soft hinge under the jaw. Health, 71% rightward arrow 58%, rend. The fight turned ugly then, no perfect dance, just grit. He took a rake across his chest and felt his haptics bloom hot, then clench cold. He bit down on the breath that wanted to be a curse and pushed umbral chi into his legs, sprinted past a swipe to force her to pivot in the cramped space. Claws gouged stone. Her shoulder stuck just long enough. He ended it the way shadow forgers did, from behind, blade buried to the hilt, whispering thanks he did not mean. The matriarch dissolved, slow and reluctant, leaving behind a core pulsing with smoky light. Tier 1 Beast Core, Nightshade Matriarch, acquired. Shadow Forged Dagger Empowerment, +8 rightward arrow +10 trait unlocked at +10, Soul Silt, on kill, 1% chance to retain a fragment granting +1% versus same type for 10 minutes, stacks to 5. Kale sat on the cold floor until his breath did not fog the air anymore. Then he stood, set the umbral hearth, and laid his gathered pieces in a neat line, iron core, 3 resin vials, beast core. The hearth's flame darkened. The dense shadows leaned in. Forge step 1, alloy the umbral iron with moonspore resin, 3 iterations. Timing window, 2.2s. Error penalty, crack, Item breaks. A bar appeared, sliding left and right with a heartbeat irregular enough to be cruel. Kale waited, counted the pulse not by sight but by the drag of the mist in his lungs, and tapped condense at each beat. Shadows braided. A thin billet formed. The second iteration wanted to sprint, he let it, catching it at the far edge of the window, sacrificing a hair of quality for safety. Forge Step 2, bind the beast core. Meridian flow minigame, root chi through lung rightward arrow heart rightward arrow wrist rightward arrow blade. Deviation damage on miss, 5%. He closed his eyes. The old map of his meridians unrolled across his skin like paper, familiar as regret. He breathed low, pulled the beast core's pulse into his own and let it out along the route, heat to heat, edge to edge. Once. Twice. The dagger's hilt did the rest, drinking. The billet shivered and pressed into a blade shape that reflected no one and nothing. You have forged Shadow Forged Dagger +1, growth. Hidden property satisfied, stable tempering, first try. Blueprint unlocked, Eclipse Soul Blade, dormant. A deeper chime followed, one that was not standard UI. The dense shadows condensed into an outline, broad-shouldered, apron-wrapped, eyes like banked coal. An NPC stepped free of the wall as though the game world decided to remember him. He carried no nameplate at first. Only when he looked at Kale did letters sketch themselves into being a Run Cinder's Hade, legacy craftsman. You kept your hands steady when the dark wanted to run, a run rumbled. His voice was bellows, old and full. Most choke the first time the core begs for a shortcut. Only shortcut worth taking is the one you planned for last life, Kale said before he could stop himself. The words tasted bitter on the way out. Arun's mouth twitched. HNH memory in the knuckles. Good. Then hear the next step, Shadow Disciple. Temper is more than heat and quenching, it is place and hour. The Eclipse Soul Blade does not wake for any forge. It drinks moonfire at the falls called Lumen Rive during Shadow Hour. Bring me a blade that has seen that light and not cracked, and I will show you how to give it a name. A new marker blinked onto Kale's map, far to the east where the Vale broke against the cliff and river. Lumen Rive. He remembered the route, a canyon threaded with wind, a bridge made of roots and rumor, nothing like safety. Shadow Hour, he asked, though he knew. He wanted the timer. Arun lifted his chin, listening to a clock only NPCs could hear. 7 hours, game time. 12 minutes, your time. Timed objective added, reach Lumen Rive before Shadow Hour. Optional, avoid death to keep tempering bonus, 10% crit stability. Kale sheathed the new blade. It felt hungrier than before. Good. When he crawled back into the night air, the mist had thinned. Messages pulsed in his periphery, a waterfall he ignored until one name cut through everything. Whisper, Aaron Valis nice trick. You always were good with your hands. Meet me at Lumen Rive. Let us see if you can keep them steady while they bleed. Kale deleted the whisper and opened region chat instead. Guilds screamed recruitment slogans. Traders hawked starter sets as if a reset could be fixed with a kit. One notice slid by that mattered system, Heaven's Accord has claimed the Twilight Bridge outpost. PvP enabled in surrounding routes. Of course they had. Heaven's Accord always moved to choke points first, made friends with the map. If he tried to sprint the main path to the falls, he would hit a toll gate of level 10 smelling of smug. He needed a way around. He knelt and pressed his palm to the soil. The Vale thrummed. Roots interlaced beneath the path like veins. There. A fissure line. A memory, a dev note from years ago about rootway traversal and rodent AI ignored at launch because it did not matter to players with wings and teleport scrolls. He did not have wings. He had a hole in the light and a knife. Kale veered off the trail, sliding down a slope into a slot canyon where water once ran and now only memory did. The ground narrowed to a seam between two stones. He dropped to his stomach, angled in sideways, and wriggled until his shoulders complained. Vale's step bucked against the constraint but carried him through the pinch with a popping sensation that made his stomach flip. He emerged into a tunnel laced with glowing fungus and the scurry-marked tracks of something with too many legs. Rootways. The air tasted old and green, sap and rot married, elegant and disgusting. He jogged, saving Vale's step for corners where the tunnel curved around pockets of sleeping things. Halfway through, his minimap chimed, 3 red dots converging behind him, close and clever. Players, not mobs. He should have disabled tracking by using Vale's step more often, but then, arena instincts in the spine never left. He killed his torch. Light collapsed to a series of breathing sounds and footfalls, his, then theirs. He set a shade wire line at knee height across the narrowest passage and took one long step back into deeper shade. The first pursuer hit the filament and stumbled. Kale moved, an economy of force. 2 strikes like punctuation marks, one to the throat, silent, one to the thigh, immobilize. The second player had the better reflex, staff up, a Heaven's Accord emblem flashing gold, and cast a blinding flare that turned the tunnel into snow. Kale rolled, dragging his hood to cut the edge of the glare, and sent his dagger under the flare, low, patient, precise. The staff wielder gasped as Sightless Edge found the blind angle under his arm. PvP, you have defeated Alisun Ha. Soul Sild PROC, 1% rightward arrow 2% versus human players, 10M. The third skidded to a stop, saw 2 guildmates down, and made the smart choice, ran. Kale did not chase. He was not here for kill boards. He was here to forge a future that did not require asking permission. He looted quickly, coin, a minor light talisman, he tossed it, wrong build, a Twilight Bridge token useful to skip a guard check, he pocketed that. He bound their boots together with shade wire and left them breathing. No reason to make enemies into martyrs. The rootway breathed him out into fern and cold air minutes later. Night had deepened. The world carried that peculiar held note that precedes a cue only insiders hear. Ahead, the trees broke and the land fell away in a cliff veined with silver. Water poured down in threads that looked like spun moonlight. Lumen Rive. Spray lifted and drifted back as glittering fog, coating everything with a patina of cold shine. You have discovered Lumen Rive, Moonfall. Shadow hour approaches, 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Kale stepped to the lip of a basalt ledge where the water sheeted into nothing, set the umbral hearth, and drew his blade. The hearth's darkness pushed back against the moonshine, where they met, the air hissed and a scent like rain on hot iron rose. He breathed, letting the water's rhythm pace his meridian flow. Lung rightward arrow heart rightward arrow wrist rightward arrow blade. The eclipse blueprint bloomed in his HUD as a web of lines waiting to be made true. Steady hands, he told the river, or himself. He lowered the blade into the edge of the fall. The water stung like bees. The metal sang, not a real sound, more a felt one, thin and hungry. He counted heartbeats. He thought of Aaron's whisper and let it pass through him like wind through a torn flag. He pulled the blade free and immediately plunged it into the hearth's dark. The world flashed negative, as if something behind the sky had blinked. Temper complete, eclipse kiss, 1/3. Bonus maintained, crit stability plus 10%, 10H real time. Item updated, Shadow Forged Dagger plus 1 rightward arrow eclipse soul blade, dormant. New property, Liminal Edge, deals bonus at light/dark boundary. A cheer rose behind him, not for him. He turned. Across the slick rocks, Heaven's Accord players spilled from the trees, a squad in polished whites and golds that drank moonlight like it was theirs by right. At their center, a tall figure in a cloak with a familiar way of holding his shoulders, a dancer's arrogance weaponized. The nameplate bobbed into view, Aaron Vallis, Heaven's Accord captain. Kale's grip tightened on the new blade, and the blade hummed like it had recognized a meal. Spray matted his hair to his temples. The moon carved a thin edge along the crest of Aaron's smile. Nice view for a reunion, Aaron said, voice bright, open, a marketer selling friendship. I brought a party so we can do this right. Kale stepped back onto the very edge where the water fell, where the moon made a knife of the air and the hearth made a hole in it. Good, he said, and the word came out steady. I forged something that only eats at borders. Boss encounter, player flagged clash at Lumen Rive will begin when the first strike lands. Environmental modifier, liminal edge zones grant plus 15% damage to weapons attuned to shadow or light. Standing in both applies both, unstable. He slid his foot until the line of his soul have dark and bright. The Eclipse soul blade purred, waking, and the mist around its edge sliced in tidy little squares. Round 2, Kale whispered, and this time it wasn't a promise. It was a plan.